Good morning. It's Brian. It's the Art of Startup War. We are back again. This is another episode where I am speaking to a founder that we have invested in. Yes, the only reason for doing this podcast is so that I can share with other investors, founders who I believe are doing phenomenal things, and we are putting our money where our mouth is. We are investing in those companies. We're actually looking for future investment, especially in this company. We want to put another $1 million or so into it. Absolutely love what they're doing. And if ever there was a time to start a podcast saying timing is everything, this is that podcast, right? And not just timing because Max got a violin playing in the background, right? That's just a little bit of musical novelty to keep us going on the show. This is timing because Mac created a company which is unbelievably impactful in the clean tech space. Now, even though Mac is UK, as of UK origin, and the company itself is based over there, even though it's going to be moving over to the US and it's going to become a large company over here, I am pretty sure he probably jumped on a plane to vote for Joe Biden when he knew that there was going to be a presidential election in America and it was going to be a choice between poisonous fossil fuels and a legacy of making the world a cleaner and more beautiful place. So we are going to talk about what you created. We're going to talk about Adgero. We're going to talk about the 30 to 50 million trucks in the world and how we could immediately reduce all of the carbon emissions by 20%. We could do it tomorrow. We're going to talk about how that would actually be a benefit to all of those trucks and all of the finances for those trucks because they would get any money back that retrofit would cost within a 2-year period, actually immediately if they financed it, and how we could actually impact with carbon emissions this second in a huge way. This is why I love your company so much. I love it because it's going to make a huge impact on the world. I love it because the timing is absolutely awesome to do it. And I love it because we're going to make a bunch of cash because you are going to raise money really fast now, as I'm seeing, and this company is going to fly. Did I get anything wrong?
That was great. That was great. Unfortunately, I'm one of these closet Canadians. I couldn't vote for Biden, but my cousins, I'm sure, took care of that for me. So, they find us all over the place, these people. But yeah, thanks for that intro, Brian. I think timing is a good point. Why wait? That's one of the things that I think is important here. If you look at the e-trucks coming out, the Adgero is not coming out until 2024, et cetera, et cetera. So, our motto is, why not now? So that's what we do. That's why we're doing hybrid retrofit.
And it's been so fascinating because this is kind of the second clean tech wave. And what happened the first time around was everybody suddenly came out. It's normally led by somebody in Hollywood. Leo or one of his friends will come out and say, we should have a more beautiful world where all of the skies are blue. And then every single company then in Silicon Valley are saying, wow, if Leo DiCaprio just said that, we should spend a couple of $1 billion on tech, which are going to become unicorns, irrespective of whether it will actually make a difference in the world or not. And so we went through that first clean tech drive, right? But what happens, the beautiful thing that happens within those initial innovations that come through, and especially with the inventions that come from that, is that you get acorns of future optimism. And so things such as, the Teslas, and even though there are multiple thought processes around a lot of the clean technologies that are coming through, the fact that we are starting to see a reduction of gas-guzzling vehicles on our road is a good thing, right? But what we know on the other end is that the grid is
Leo's heart is in the right place. All those people in that first wave, I think, for the most part, their hearts are in the right place. I think it's like a lot of things. You have a big wave of enthusiasm, and then just like anything, you have to get down to brass tacks and see if you can actually make something work. So enthusiasm is important. It gets things moving. But at the end of the day, you have to sell something that someone's going to buy and make money using. And that's sort of, I think, where we are now, where we're happy to have enthusiasm. I love your enthusiasm, Brian. But I think we're at the point now where we can say to a skeptical fleet, okay, we'll give you a demo vehicle, come back in 3 months. And when it's ticked all the boxes and what you're looking for, you'll take 20 more, 50 more, 100 more. And that's what we're doing. And that's part of the raise we're doing right now, is this launch in the United States is a big part of that.
And the more I think about trucks in general, because you focus on trucks, right? So it's about retrofitting trucks, and it's about making sure that using kinetic energy, you can actually reduce the emissions of those trucks by about 20%, or you can increase the energy by
Yeah, yeah.
20%,
It's like
right?
it's like a big Prius, right? Exactly the same concept. It's the execution, which is a bit difficult. I mean, why? I mean, it's a good question. It's a question I asked when I filed the patent. Is why don't you just scale up the Prius? Prius is a great car. Well, the problem is when you get to these big, heavy vehicles, you are working with very high currents.
Hmm.
And if you want to have sort of a small battery that doesn't weigh too much, that doesn't eat too much payload up, you end up burning them out. And it becomes a very expensive consumable. And so you've got this weird world where you can go fully electric if you have a very short range to cover. And that's going to go full electric very, very quickly. And then you have the stuff which is kind of impossible for the full electrics. I mean, you're not going to be doing 1,000 miles a day, no matter how hard they're working over at Volvo and Freightliner. So we need to do something for those people that, they have to get a job done and they can't go full electric. So exactly, we come in with a system that will capture this otherwise wasted energy when you're braking and give it back to you in the acceleration. And we can do that because we use ultra capacitors and not batteries. So to speak very simply, we don't have a chemical reaction of any sort. It's just a static charge. And we charge it just those 3 million times, et cetera. They don't burn out. They last longer than the truck. And that was the enabling technology. And that didn't exist 10 years ago. The stuff we're using didn't exist 3 years ago. So, that is why, DAF, Kenworth, they tried the hybrid systems. The vehicles worked, but they couldn't put in the miles, so they weren't economical. And, done. You have to make money in this business.
Yeah, and I want to talk about your background in a couple of minutes, but I do want to really emphasize why this is so tremendously important. When we first made the investment, I thought, this is a super investment because they can make an immediate impact right now. And there's actually no reason for people not to want that immediate impact because there's a financial benefit right now. And we know that it works because we spoke to one of your customers and your customer said, this is the best thing since sliced bread. So all of those boxes were ticked very nicely. But the more I've thought about it, the more I think about the actual amount of energy these trucks use up. It is unbelievable. And not just the fact that they're big. It's not that simple. It's the fact that they get more usage than any other vehicle. Like my car, genuinely, it doesn't matter if it's electric or gas. It sits in my garage 90% of the time. Like, I don't need a car. And I reflect probably 70 to 80% of people. And as people start moving home, cars are going to become nothing more than something that you look at as you're walking through your front door, right? You pass them in the driveway, you look at them and you think, we should go somewhere nice on the weekend to drive somewhere, right? So we're already moving to that place. But trucks are actually going in the opposite direction. They are the most utilized of anything anywhere. I don't know anything other than phones that are used more than trucks in a 24-hour period.
Yeah, it's and truck tonnage is just booming as it goes hand in hand with the booming economy, and also our new ways of doing logistics. Amazon means trucks, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really is the lifeblood of our economy. And part of making things more efficient is making sure those trucks do more miles, unless you can put things onto rail and stuff like that. So we're stuck with trucks for quite some time. It's a statistic I often say, over the past 20 years in the United States, truck tonnage is up 45%, and dispatchable electricity generation is up 2%. You're not going to flip everything to a big rollout of electric trucks on a system like that. It's going to take decades of CapEx to have a more robust grid that can do that, and you'll get there someday. But that's if we're lucky. 25 years down the line, and I sincerely doubt it's going to be 25 years. And so again, let's do something now. Let's save you money now. Let's save some emissions now, because we have these enabling technologies with energy storage and also with our motors. So
you're like one of those rare and hard to find pragmatists who says, yeah, well, okay, it would be lovely, but how about we do it before I die? Okay, wouldn't that be a good start? Wouldn't it be really great if we actually did something today rather than challenging it for the future? Like, I love the fact that you're future-proofed. It doesn't really matter if it's gas, doesn't matter if it's hydrogen, doesn't matter if it's electric. You can work through all of those different energy sources. But you're saying, do this now. U.S. government, Joe Biden, you want a legacy, here's your legacy. Right now, today, you can reduce 20% of all carbon emissions out of coming through trucks in America. Right now today, the biggest probably source.
Well, and here's the thing, I'd be delighted if we're able to, capture any of Mr. Biden's largesse, but we don't depend on that for our business model. We don't need subsidies to make this, profitable for you. And again, as you said earlier, if you finance it, you're making money out from day one. And sometimes you don't have to finance it because we're going to be giving it via fleet lessor like Ryder or Penske, for example. So yeah, why wouldn't you do it? It's funny. I'm the only person on my team who's not an engineer. Even our CFO is an electrical engineer. It's just weird. I actually come from a training background, but my childhood was spent on a farm. My father and grandfather are ranchers, and it's a world with a lot of heavy diesel equipment and a very sort of get her done mentality. So, sitting around waiting isn't something I've ever seen my father or grandfather do. And it was really not baked into the way we do things in my companies. So, it's, I'm not the engineer, but I think I have the right, how do you say it? Get-to-itiveness? What's the word?
You had, I did
that. I like selling stuff, and I like getting things onto trucks. I like seeing trucks get work done.
I did a very nice little tour over in Israel when we were looking for some startups about 2 years ago, and I picked up one word from over there which I really liked, which is chutzpah, and isn't
it chutzpah?
Oh, is it chutzpah? Yeah,
I don't know.
That's what you have.
Montreal. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing.
That's what you have, right? It's the get at it, the go out there and make things happen. And that's what I really like. So I want to tease our listeners a little bit with what the actual financial potential of this is, because it is quite staggering. And I'd like to regress back and go where you were trying to segue us through there, which is to your background, because I think we talk very easily about, well, we created this patent and we've created this company and we've raised $1 million+ and we brought it to market and we've got all of these clients and the world is a beautiful place. But that's really not what represents a startup. What represents a startup is the entire life cycle, that hero's journey of when you start, you get the idea and you stand there and you say, maybe I'm mad. Actually, I'm definitely mad. And then you go through a period of lots of people that are very nice to you at the beginning, but then many of those people, their only intention in life is to make your life harder. And then we come out the other side. So before we come out the other side, where like Zorro is winning the fight, I want to start off at the beginning.
Well, it's funny. I said it earlier, I'm the only one in the company who's not an engineer. And the funny thing is, I probably would never have had the idea to start all this if I had been an engineer. So what I was in training. I ran a language training school that did B2B training. And so I'm based in Strasbourg and Molsheim, where they do modifications on heavy Mercedes trucks. You've got Mercedes CTT there. They got a contract from the Canadian Army to up armor recovery vehicles for Afghanistan. And so we got the contract to do some translation and training and et cetera, et cetera. So I spent a few years over at Mercedes CTT, seeing these armored trucks go out and the blasted remains of them coming back. It was pretty radical. But then talking to the guys on the line, talking to the engineers, talking to the designers, and it just sort of came up as a conversation one day. It's like, why don't you see big Priuses running around? They said, well, that's a good question. And they said, well, there are two reasons you don't. The first one is we tried and burnt out all the batteries and it cost too much. But secondly, trucks are not like cars. If I make a Mercedes S-Class, you make it and it goes to the dictator that drives it. Actroses, a Mercedes Actros or a Freightliner Cascadia or whatever, it's made by the OEM. It goes to a bodybuilder or an upfiller or whatever who fits the aftermarket stuff, all the third-party stuff that you put on it that makes it a working vehicle, and then it goes to the end user. And so you put so much stuff onto these trucks, reinforced axles, retarders, additional fuel tanks, exhaust after treatment, et cetera, that even finding the space to put stuff on there is extremely difficult. And so when you're looking at like a European spec tractor, they're so short, tractor unit, you can't really do much on that at all. So we actually did a curse system and went onto the trailer. On American tractor units, they're longer, and so it gives you a bit more space. But if you've looked at any modern exhaust system, you get under one of those trucks, it's like this massive gas works. So like, I've got no room to do anything. And so that was part of it as well. It's very difficult to engineer, and again, it's expensive. And trucks, it's pile it high and sell them cheap, and that's why it doesn't work for the OEMs. And the batteries burning out is why it didn't work for the end users, because who wants a $10,000 consumable? And so went to thinking about it and came across solutions that had been tried using ultracapacitors. Crosspoint Kinetic had an early system using Maxwell ultracapacitors, but the problem is they didn't have the energy density necessary for large trucks. And they were much smaller vehicles. And so we worked trying to find a solution. We found a better ultracapacitor that we used, and that became the heart of our system. That was provided by Skeleton Technologies. And that was an enabling technology to get those first proof of concept vehicles out and prove that this thing worked.
And was that a
And
moment? Was
yeah,
that a moment, Mac, where did you know it was going to work before that, or was that a moment where you just thought, "Oh shit, I actually have something huge here"?
well, it's the big question was, you know, will the energy storage do what it says on the tin? And it did. And then so we ran some tests. Got on an urban route on a rigid, we got or a straight truck, we got 32% better fuel economy. It was a pure urban course. Like, yes, this is amazing. And so we got Innovate UK funding to do 2 odd years of trials on the road. And on the one hand, it was great. On the other hand, it was a huge disaster. And I'll sort of explain both. Is we put a lot of miles on these things and we broke a bunch of stuff. But the most fundamental thing was we discovered that permanent magnet motors in this application do not work. And what I mean by this is when you're spinning up a permanent magnet motor, you're always going to be generating voltage. You're always generating some sort of drag or whatever. And on a truck, a hybrid truck, you will have large sections where you're trunking from a depot to the city. And so in the city, you'll be saving a lot of fuel. And you get up on the road and you're actually getting worse fuel economy because you're not stopping and starting. You're just cruising and you're adding drag to the system. And this is a huge disaster. And we realized we have to change to a completely new motor topology. And so we went out looking and found a wonderful company in England called Advanced Electric Machines and started working with them, developing a new high torque variant of their revolutionary motor. And now we're sort of hashing out some joint patents. So we're going to have shared IP on that. And we're the only people in the world that offer that. So, Helion can't offer that. We're the only ones.
So what did that mean?
Zero drag system that
Okay.
will not catch fire, doesn't need a clutch. If it fails, it's a spinning hunk of metal like an induction motor, but it's not as heavy as an induction motor. It's nearly as power dense as a permanent magnet motor. So we've got really the best of all worlds. It doesn't need a special inverter. Just use any sort of 3-pole inverter you want. And that is huge. So those are the two big enabling technologies that allow us to do things that nobody else can do and at lower prices. Because our motor uses no permanent magnets. So it's more environmentally friendly, but it's also cheaper. It doesn't use any copper. So it's easier to recycle, but it's also cheaper. And anything that's cheaper, we love, as long as it doesn't break. And everything was always focused on how can we make this make sense for the trucker's bottom line and not for Leo DiCaprio, even though he's very good looking and he loves the planet. So that's always been we've been driven by saving every penny we can, making sure we don't add a second of additional downtime to what a fleet's doing, fitting in with your maintenance intervals, making sure you can fit the whole system to a truck in a day with 2 guys so you don't overload workshops, making sure that you can deliver the system to be fitted completely discharged so you don't have to train your guys in HV safety. So that costs money. And those are all things that we do that others don't. And that really adds up. And that means our system has a much better ROI than competing systems do.
Phenomenal. And you talk a lot about we. When you say we, are you talking like in the usual startup schizophrenic way?
I generally talk about myself that way, but in this case, there are actually some other people behind me, right? So we do have a great team. I'll work from like the real engineers first.
Yeah.
So Rory Oliver Hall, he was at Jaguar Land Rover designing hybrid drivetrains for them. He's actually an old F1 hand. He was on the Stewart F1 team. In the past, I've actually said Ferrari once, but that's another fella that I worked with. And he has spent a couple decades now working on transmissions and hybrid transmissions and also bespoke transmissions for very heavy trucks.
Wow.
And we met during the Innovate UK trial. We needed someone to help us with CAN bus wrangling, basically. And we started talking to him and, it just took off from there, and he's now started designing stuff for us. So yeah, we've got great chops with him, and he's going to really help us build out our team because he's got an excellent network that we're going to hire from. In terms of our sales guys, Will Putter, he worked in dual fuel systems. So those are systems where you're injecting a bit of compressed natural gas or potentially propane into a diesel engine with a bit of diesel. He did that basically 2 decades with UK and European fleets. So the idea of retrofitting something onto heavy trucks is something we've got 20 years of experience with Will, and selling it, making money with it. Then a thing I don't talk about a lot is because there's not much to show is here's the metal thing. This is the kinetic energy recovery system. You can touch it, you can hit it with a hammer, which is great. We love this. But then there's all the data. We're generating tons of data with this stuff. We're
Ooh.
pushing to your major telematics platforms. This is value that we're generating, which becomes our recurring revenue. And the guy who's in charge of that is Frederick Soulier, who's a professor of embedded systems at the University of Strasbourg. But perhaps more interestingly, and maybe this will ring some bells with some people, he was the CTO of Caldera Graphics, and he was instrumental in their acquisition by Dover Corporation about maybe 4 years ago now. So yeah, we're very happy to have him. And then finally, Deborah Hudson, our non-executive director and our acting CFO. So she's an electrical engineer, so she really understands what we're doing. And then she has an MBA and spent a decade at McKinsey, so she knows what she's doing on that side of the fence too. So it's rare to find someone who understands the first thing about trucking. And it's not a big criticism of people, because trucks are invisible because they work so well. You don't see them. You know, oh, my supermarket is full again this morning. Yay. You don't notice the trucks because they work so well. Finding people who have chops in finance, who have chops to understand how fleets work and trucks works and things like that, it is really quite unique. And we're very happy to have Deborah on the team.
So how did you convince these people? Because at the beginning it was just Mac, right? It's Mac with a crazy idea.
It was Mac, and it was Fred. And then Fred recommended an engineer who turned out to be a very bad engineer who had to fire. Then we got a better engineer. So there are lots of little sort of bumps there originally, right? It was a very, very early stage, sort of a back of a napkin sort of thing. I would say there are a couple of big things. We can never have enough recognition to Mark Kerskuren over at SDC Trailers, and then his replacement, who's taken over now, Enda Krishnan, because they were the guys who really were the first ones to say, okay, let's do something. And they put some money on the table, and we built a kinetic energy recovery system for Stobart that unfortunately never ran on the road because we never actually got the money together to make it street legal. So that was displayed at Hanover. Electrically, it functioned just fine, but that was built on an absolute shoestring. And I'm sure SDC can tell you some stories about this, because we wanted to make it, but we ran out of money. And that was frustrating. And then on the strength of that, because that was exhibited at Birmingham at the Commercial Vehicle Show, and then at IAA, where we won the second prize in trailer innovation. Then we got noticed. And so Will Putter, now our commercial director, calls me out of the blue. He was working for a gas fitment place at the time. He had tried to source something from his Lightning hybrids when they were doing their original hydraulic system. And he called them up, and he basically said to him, it doesn't work. and this is quite funny, because I had assumed that it worked. And that's why we launched our kinetic energy recovery system on the trailers. Because reading the press, we thought, oh man, look at all this competition on the rigids, the straight trucks and the tractors. Oh, we're going to die. Let's do the trailers. But then we discovered none of it really existed. And it was quite funny. So, I mean, now Lightning has moved on to really good stuff. I'm not trying to slag Lightning here. And they had the good sense to move away from a system that wasn't working to a system that does work. And I think they've just signed a big contract with UPS. So congratulations to them. At Parker Runwise, again, a hydraulic system. It works on paper, but in practice, it's super heavy and super loud. And so nobody bought them. So we were able to sort of tick, 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 tick. Actually, nobody's actually in this space. And so Will called us up, says, can you do a rigid? Can you do a straight truck? Like, yeah, sure. And that is actually going to be our star product, because it's easier to build, it's cheaper to build, and it's really an ideal application. Those are the guys going into towns, distributing around towns. It's that start, stop drive cycle that wastes a lot of energy, where energy recovery makes a lot of sense. And so that's something we wouldn't have looked at if Will hadn't run into Lightning saying, oh, we're not doing that anymore.
I think, Mac, what everybody's getting here is that you went through from the very beginning. You put it together yourself. It was your idea. It was your baby. A few people started to come in, and you being out there and talking about something which people felt, especially people who are the geeky people in the industry, the people who really understand the mechanics of how things work, they realized that you were onto something really big. Now, that was at that time. You are now in a very different time today. The investors that we're putting you in touch with, since we've invested with you, are raving over you. So let's talk a little bit about that.
I was going to say, this is ideal for us where we are right now, because when we came out of the Innovate UK program, the whole point of that was to take you from the test bench to commercialization. And we came out of that. And then, after sort of futzing around a bit, then we met you guys. And now we're getting the intros to the people that can really take this to the market and give us what we need to make that final leap from having something which we could sell to something that we are selling, and bringing it to America. I mean, it's impossible to imagine doing a product for trucks and say, oh, we're going to stop at the Atlantic, thanks. So yeah, no, we have to bring it over here. And Expert Dojo has been transformative in this. And so, I think the biggest proof of this is our round is already partly subscribed. With a bit of luck, it's half subscribed.
Yeah.
And it's from people who know about trucks. It's from people who know about fleets, and you're right. You're past the beauty contest sort of thing. You're to the guys asking the hard questions. They're saying, how much does this weigh? How much does this cost? What are the regulatory impacts of this? You're like, Hosanna. Someone actually knows what Regulation 13 is. Let's go. And yeah, it's very, very exciting.
This has to be one of the best moments of your life, is it?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's as any entrepreneur would tell you, sometimes things really go to shit, and then sometimes they're going well, and it's just ups and downs constantly. What keeps you going is the idea that you're making progress, and we're at a step now where getting to this place where we are now, where we can sell something which is compliant with regulations, which we have a supply chain for, which we have distribution for, which we have OEM partners for, and now that we have investor support for, yeah, it's a huge thing. And just from an ego point of view, not to say woo me, it's proof that I'm not completely crazy.
Yeah, and you're not, because
when you're out there in the woods and you're just those those desert crossings, sometimes you think, have I made a terrible mistake? And you tough it out, and you think, no, the laws of thermodynamics are on my side. This should be good, and you keep on going. And in this case, it looks like we're on the right track.
You are on a phenomenal. You're on a phenomenal track. It's like going. I'm not a skier, but I like this analogy. It's like the ski lift is kind of dragging you up. You didn't get to sit on the ski lift going up. It's dragging you up. And it's so cold that you're having to change your hands to hold on as it's dragging you up. It's your skis behind you. And you've just arrived on the top. And your hands are nice and warm, and you're looking down, and it's a tough slope that you're going to go down.
I'd say just a little bit different on that. I'd say our fundraising sort of between getting to the end of Innovate UK and meeting Expert Dojo was being on a really slow T-bar, and suddenly you discover the high-speed lift. You're like, oh, thank God. And then suddenly you can zip up to the top. Because there's an ambition that we had not encountered before. There's an energy that we had not encountered before. We're working with some very competent people in the UK, but it's a completely different level of, let's go out and get it. We're hungry and we want to do this right. And so Expert Dojo is hopping on that high speed lift, and now you're about to drop us off at the top. And yes, now I think we're going to be on that lovely piece that we've wanted to be on. Yeah, it's just the amount of contacts and good contacts that we've had in the past 6 weeks or whatever, vastly outstrips the previous year and a half.
I feel nervous.
Yeah, it's been transformative for us.
I tell you, so we're going to go to like what the potential is in a moment in sales, because it's truly staggering. But when I first met you, I was genuinely nervous, and not nervous because of the product. Not at all. It's really funny. I never really doubted the product. Not nervous because of you, not nervous because of your team. The opposite. I was incredibly encouraged by that, but nervous because it has such a tremendous ability to impact the world today. And it is such a shame when you get something that can make such a positive impact where it doesn't manage, where even if it's not implemented tomorrow, even if it's implemented in a week's time, well, that's 6 hotel nights that we've just lost between now and a week's time. So I felt this nervous energy, and look, Expert Dojo are here to support, and we want to help. And obviously we, by extension, love entrepreneurs, because I love entrepreneurs, and I love real entrepreneurs building real products that are changing the world in a really impactful way. And the money comes from the exits from those in the future, but in the trenches at the beginning, it's a beautiful journey to be a part of. But you in particular, I feel that you can make such transformative change, like right now in this moment, that we have to run 4 times faster than I would even normally run. And what I'm seeing is that I'm running 4 times faster and you're running 8 times faster. Like you said to me just when we start, I'm sorry about all the emails, but there's so many good things happening. There's like literally something every hour happening with you right now. So I want to talk maybe a little bit about why is all that happening right now? And then not Expert Dojo, but like there are other things that are happening in the world. But then also talk about the revenue that can come through over the next couple of years so investors really get a feel to the magnitude of what's being built.
Sure. Well, now just a quick little segue over to that, but an aside first. The emails that I was inundating your inbox with the past day or two, that was from the Solar Impulse Foundation, which is a great initiative by Bertrand Piccard, the guy who flew around the world in a solar powered plane to try to identify 1,000 solutions that are implementable now. They'll save you money and they'll also help save the planet. And this has been a while coming together. They've been working, chipping away in the background, and this is about to go live. There's an embargo on some things that I know that I can't actually tell you. You just gotta go.
Awesome.
Oh, you have to wait another week. But this is something which is just providing additional momentum, and I think it's really exciting. They've actually set up 2 funds that will only fund the Solar Impulse solutions with some French banks. So this shows that even the big institutions are starting to take this seriously. So now you've got obviously central banks talking about this a lot. You have to clean and green bonds, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But even banks like major French banks like Crédit, stuff like that, are saying, oh, right, okay, we actually have to have a fund to really push this vision that Bertrand Piccard has had forward. And we're very, very happy to have been selected as one of those 1,000 solutions. So I think with this and Expert Dojo, this together just adds more momentum to what we're doing right now. Now, in terms of revenue, if I look at this year, right? So you look at our slide, it's like, they have three customers. Yes, but those 3 customers have $5 billion in annual revenue, and they have 60,000 vehicles. And one of those customers, Cube Logistics down in Australia, we make a system for them that our only competitor costs $1 million, and ours costs 80,000. So we have no competition in that space. So when I say, this year we'll book over $2 million in sales, yes, we will. We'll book most of that. With 2 of our 3 clients. So there's real demand, and people are being proactive about this. And I think what's really interesting, and it's just kind of dumb luck, is fleets today, most fleets have basic telematics on them. So your drive cycle, and you can very easily filter through how many stops per mile those vehicles are making. And if your vehicles are making 2 or 3 full stops per mile, well, give me a call and I'll save you 20% of your fuel. It's because, you just quickly filter it. And that's what Fraikin did. They said, okay, fine. All right, we've got 20,000 vehicles on our fleet. When do you start? It's like, okay. And then that leads to the questions about bottlenecks. And those are good questions, but we're basically fabless. We've got our motors and our energy storage. Both of our suppliers for those can do about 30,000 units today. And they've got greenfields to expand to, and are expanding, and are well funded. So that's unique, and you can't contract that out. But everything else, bracketry, looms, everything, they're commoditized. I can go to any bodybuilder in America, and he'll have a network of people feeding into him already that will do my 12-volt looms, 24-volt looms, CAN bus looms, 400-volt HV looms. Fine, I just give him the spec, and he comes back. So I don't have to build that out either. What we do internally is we design the whole system, but we design the ECU. We write the software that runs on it. And then we do the whole back end with telematics, data, and then machine learning for fleet optimization and energy optimization. And that is going to become a much bigger part of our business as the cohort of equipped trucks grows. And that's why Fred is so important in the years to come, Mr. Soulier. So we're happy to have him. And data is going to be driving a big part of our revenue for 4 years from now. So we're not just in one-off revenue from sales of the KERS kits. No, that is a one-off revenue, but we also have recurring revenue from all of the data-related services from the data we generate on that.
And I see that if we put that into numbers, you can very easily do 2.5 million this year, just based on a couple of trucks, not even that many, right?
Yeah,
You can,
but
and then
yeah,
the
and I think
following
the other thing
year,
which is
10
really
times
exciting
that.
about this is on a truck today, and in America, they're 12-volt systems, and Europe, the 24-volt systems. When you fit your truck with an Adgero KERS system, you're bringing high voltage to the truck. So it's a 400-volt system. We have an open high voltage bus that third parties can clamp onto. So if you're designing a reefer unit, you can plug that on there. If you're designing an electric forklift that clamps onto the back of your trailer, any of those things, there's a huge ecosystem that can just glom on to our high voltage bus because it makes their integration easier. And then also, an Adgero bus is going to be the same if it's on a Freightliner, if it's on a Kenworth, if it's on a Volvo. It's going to be the same interface for all of those. So it's going to be brand agnostic in terms of the truck. And yeah, so we make a lot more possible than just saving fuel from kinetic energy recovery. We facilitate and make it cheaper for third parties to come in and put high voltage systems onto the truck. We make it simpler and easier for third party developers for telematics to come in because they only have one API to write for, the Adgero layer. And then we push out to Masternaut, Geotab, and all those guys. So you don't have to write umpteen different codes. So we
So let me ask you.
that.
So let me ask you a question.
It's something which is built to grow as well, and we really do want to cultivate these ecosystems that are going to build up around this. Because for the moment, if you want high voltage on a truck, there's all sort of kludges, or you buy an eCascadia. But I think that will be a big part of our growth moving forward is the HV ecosystem that comes out of this.
Okay, cool. So I want to hold you to a number because everybody who's been listening to this,
Yeah,
they get it. Like this is now, this is ready. You have an entire ecosystem and manufacturing arrangement in place. You have product ready to deploy. You could do a lot of money. We know you're going to do $2.5 million this year, barring an absolute disaster, right? So let's look at next year and beyond. Can this company do $100 million in sales? In
absolutely.
revenue?
We can do $100 million in sales before the end of 2025. And
Okay,
we can do,
you heard it
it's
here.
not something I'm pulling out of my hat, to be polite. We are partnering with SAF Holland. We already offer our e-axle is the SAF Holland Track E using our motor, which is now the Track E's motor, and plugged into our energy storage and management and everything like that. You look, if you ever see my pitch deck, you'll see the SAF badge on the hubcap. That's not because I stole it off of Google image search. That's because I'm working with SAF. And the Bay Area, you've got 9 SAF distributors in the Bay Area. I'm not sure who's driving trucks in the Bay Area and fixing them, but hey, it's not just nerds there. In LA, you've got 10 or something like that. We have hundreds of distribution sites across America today. We can ship semi-knocked down to Holland, Michigan, and then go out through that. There's all sorts of stuff that we're exploring to be able to take full advantage of made in America conditions. And already it's easy to source probably half our components by weight in America. So again, all your bracketry, all your drive shafts, all your looms, all your cooling systems, we would buy American for that, obviously, because it just makes sense. It's commoditized truck parts that we buy locally. And then, if it makes sense to, for example, our energy modules, if we send over the cells and build the modules in America, there are plenty of companies that can do that, and that's fine. We just want to do what is necessary to do this as fast as we possibly can.
I love it.
There's no reason to delay.
I love it. And I want to finish with this podcast on that number of 100 million. If you're not convinced, then you never will be. I was convinced by the second phone call that I had with Mac before we even went through the systems itself. This is real. This is now. The round is filling up extremely quickly. Mac, how can people contact you to have a discussion with you?
Okay. Well, you can go to our website. It's Adgero, adgero.co.uk, and there's a contact form there. You can contact Brian via any links on the podcast. Or you can drop me an email directly if you like. It's just my name, Mac_Murray @adgero.eu. But I think probably the website's the easiest way to get it, because we got this lovely little cartoon video to explain what we do. And so if anyone's like, what's a retrofit hybrid system? You click that at 60 seconds.
Beautiful. Hey, listen, Mac, I just want to say to you now what I say to you every single day. I could not be happier that we invested in you. We're with you all the way in this journey. I love what you've built. I love where it's going. And so pleased that we made the right choice with you.
Well, we're really over the moon to be part of the Expert Dojo team. So let's take this to that 100 million.
That's a wrap, buddy.